Today is April 15th, 2025, the bicentennial year of the Erie Canal's completion. My name is Ross Stagnetti, and I'm chasing the ghost of Nathan Roberts, the canal's engineering genius. Reliable residents have told me that they have spotted Mr. Roberts at 5 locations in the town of Lenox, including the village of Canastota. Today, Ellen and Mark Dunbar are here to hopefully help us capture an encounter with Mr. Roberts. Oh, this is the gravesite of Nathan Roberts. Several people have indicated that he's been seen here on occasion. Nathan was laid to rest in 1851. I don't see any trace of him though. Mr. Roberts, Alan, there he is. Wow. Mr. Roberts, do you have time for an interview, sir? He's vanished. We're across Route 5 from the home built in the early 1820s for the Nathan Roberts family in Canastota. Mark, he's walking on the side of the, oh my God, he's admiring his old homestead. Mr. Roberts, you have time for an interview, sir? Please? He's gone. We're at the Robert Street Middle School in Canastota. Several students say they saw a man who fits the description of Nathan Roberts on school grounds. Maybe Mr. Roberts is seeking employment. After all, he was a school teacher before becoming a canal engineer. His areas of expertise are math and technology, always in demand. Superintendent Sean Becerra has given us the okay to be on campus. He's alerted the resource officer. We certainly don't want to cause a lockdown. Look, Alan, he's here. Checking out the sign that bears his name. Mr. Roberts, do you have time for an interview, sir? Please? Now where'd he go? We're at the Main Street Bridge over the old Erie Canal in Canastota. That's a Corky Goss mural based on paintings and photos from the 19th century. It's a view looking west. Hey, Nathan's reappeared. Looks like he's walking over to the kiosk, which has information about the mural. Mr. Roberts, you have time for an interview, sir? Mr. Roberts? Ellen, he's gone again. This is getting frustrating. I have one more opportunity. A woman who lives near the Canal Town Museum said she noticed a white-haired man wearing a black outfit walking in and out of the building for the past 2 weeks. She's threatened to call the Canastota police. We better get over there before he gets arrested. Ellen, it's Nathan. He just came from behind. He's heading toward the museum. I hope he has a key, and I hope he doesn't trip the alarm system. Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
now do you have time for an interview?
You know, you've been pretty persistent, following me all around town. I suppose we should get at it. Yes.
Well,
let's
thank you
do
very
it.
much. Please be seated.
Okay, I will.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts, and welcome to the Canastota Canal Town Museum. I'm Ross Stagnetti. I'm with the Board of Directors here at the museum, and we really appreciate you accepting our invitation to be interviewed. This is the 15th interview in a series we call Canal Town Commentary, but it's the first interview that I've done with a dead person.
Well, let me address that. I'm only dead in the natural, but I'm very much alive in the spirit world. And you probably want to know where I was born and when and all that. So, to start off, my life began in Piles Grove, New Jersey on July 28th, 1776. And that's the same year that America celebrates their independence from Great Britain, as you all know.
Well, I apologize for referring to you as a dead person. I'm in awe of you. You're considered to be an Erie Canal engineering genius.
Well, no apology necessary, and I want to thank you very much for using that word genius, because it's absolutely important that the folks know just how good I was. Okay, as a token of my appreciation for granting me this interview, here's a little coin that I held with me, a good luck charm, if you will, for the 8 years that we worked on the canal, and that coin is dated 1817,
Yes.
which is when the work started. And like I said, I carried that in my pocket all during the process.
So from 1817, the date on this half dollar, until the canal was completed, you carried this as a good luck charm.
Correct.
And carried it ever since, and I'm honored. That I really appreciate this. This is fantastic. You know, I've been interested in your life story ever since reading your biography by Doris Lawson. She was a teacher in Canastota for many years, and her husband, Dr. Eric Lawson Sr., and family lived in your home for a number of years. Today, the home is owned by Mr. J. Johnson. After reading the book, I jotted down some notes, and I have a few questions I'd like to present to you, if you wouldn't mind.
No, let's get it on here.
And we're going to begin with one of the first jobs that you held before you got involved in the canal construction. Apparently you were a school teacher.
That's correct. I reached that ripe old age of 16, and I had a real passion for mathematics, and so there was a need for teachers, and so I started teaching in Plainfield, New Jersey, and then from there I went to Westmoreland, New York, and from there to Whitestown.
So you were a teacher at the age of 16.
Yes.
Today, a 16-year-old would probably be a sophomore or junior in high school.
Yes.
So
I want to just let you know that at that age I was not entirely confident in my teaching skills, so I would often study at night so I could fortify my teaching skills, not just for my sake, but the sake of the students. I wanted them to learn quickly. And as an example of that, if you recall, when you first got behind the wheel of a horseless carriage, or as you call them now, a car, how confident were you or your father when you went out and got behind the wheel of that vehicle?
true. So you're familiar with some of the more modern technology. You mentioned horseless carriage, the automobile, which didn't come around until after your death.
Yes, so I'm very familiar with that, and nowadays they have power windows, power brakes, power steering. They have GPS, which they use that instead of maps. And not only that, now they have driverless cars. Look out for that one.
Now, you left the teaching profession. What was the reason?
Well, I wanted to increase my wealth, and I soon discovered that that was not going to happen on a teacher's salary, so I got into buying and selling land.
So you were a speculator?
Pretty much. I ended up buying some property in Moortown, Vermont, and I was able to get 100 acres at $2 an acre. And so that was a pretty good start, and I continued to buy and sell. And in the fall is when I sold the property, and that's when I moved down to Watertown area.
Watertown, New York?
Yes.
At some point, I believe you were involved in farming. I don't know if it was...
That's right, yes. I purchased a farm up there, and I didn't hang on to that for very long, but I sold that later on that fall.
Okay.
I had a profit.
Wow. I noticed, a little sidetrack here, I noticed that according to Mrs. Lawson's book, in 1806 you experienced a solar eclipse. Can you describe what that was like?
Yes, that happened during the month of June, and gradually got kind of dark and looked like a twilight time of day. The stars appeared, and there was definitely a chill in the air. So.
Well, we experienced something similar to that a year ago, 2024. We had a solar eclipse. My grandkids experienced that, and that's the thing they remember most, that the temperature dropped, the sky darkened, and it was a strange sensation for them. I'm going to move ahead to 1811, and the book indicates that you managed a cotton factory in Oneida, New York?
Yes, I took a position there as like a manager.
Now, you mentioned Oneida Community. Was there any connection with Oneida Community, which they produced silverware many, many years later?
Yes, eventually that became Oneida Limited, and that was founded by John Humphrey Noyes. And then later on it became Sherrill Manufacturing, and a much reduced role because the business was not there. So anyways, they made the silverware, and they produced that under the label of Liberty Tableware.
Now, the cotton factory, the textile plant, was that affected by foreign trade? Were there any problems?
Absolutely, yeah. In the very beginning, it was a very robust business, moving right along, and things were very exciting. You know, orders coming and going, watching the product leave the warehouse, and it was a very exciting time. And then we reached a point where there was a lot of competition from foreign entities and countries like Great Britain. And so it really cut into our business. It became kind of boring. And so I left that business and decided to purchase a large parcel of land, about 50 acres, in the town of Lenox. And that's right on the edge of Canastota.
Right. What was the purchase price? Can you recall what?
It was $5,000.
And did you have any livestock on the farm?
Yes, I put like 300 sheep on there, and many cows, many horses, and it was a very large production.
So you've gone from teaching to land speculating to farming, and that brings us up to 1816, and there was some significant planning going into what became the Erie Canal. You studied a route for the state.
Yeah, we studied a route from Rome, New York, out to Clyde. And anyways, we were busy that winter, drawing up maps and making plans and all that.
Okay. Now, you played a significant role in engineering this canal. I assume you had an engineering degree from university?
Actually, no. There was no colleges or universities that taught architecture or surveying, for that matter. And so I was hired solely on my command of the mathematics and surveying.
Okay, all right. Excellent. I'm going to move ahead with your marriage to Lavinia.
Yes.
And if I'm not mistaken, Lavinia was 24, you were 40.
Yeah, I know you're saying that like it's kind of unusual, but during those times, that was very frequently happened. The girls would be married by the age of 17 or 18, and usually to older men.
Well, we're seeing that trend now. I mean, it seems like the younger folks are waiting to get married a bit longer than we did, or I did anyway.
Yes.
Now, the following year, very significant year, and a significant event took place in Rome, New York on the 4th of July, 1817.
Yes.
Could you tell us about what happened in Rome?
Okay, that was mostly like a ceremonial grand opening where a group of politicians convene and they, take a ceremonial dig with usually like a brass-plated shovel. And I understand that a lot of times they use sand, and goodness knows we wouldn't want anybody getting hurt trying to lift some dirt.
Sure.
So yeah, that was pretty much that. But the real work began that fall, and that's when the real work started. In our area, the Canastota area, and we went west.
Right. So it would have been a photo op if photography had been around then, but we have a portrait here, a painting of that event.
Yes.
In fact, I believe that photography didn't come into existence until about the year after the canal was completed. And Rome.
That photo there, I believe the guy holding the shovel in the front, I believe that's DeWitt Clinton.
DeWitt Clinton, the governor.
And yes, and I believe that's me right behind him.
Oh, okay. Very nice.
So yes.
Yeah. Well, continue with my questioning here. If there are any questions that you feel uncomfortable with, just tell me.
Okay.
We'll move on. Now, 24 days later, it was July 28th, 1817. Significant date in your family's history.
Yes, I had a son born on that date, and actually that's the date of my birthday. So that coincidence, if you will, that's what they call, that would make us birthday twins. And astrologists refer to that as, they say that they would have a strong bond between the two people, and probably most likely similar life careers or life paths, and a very similar way of thinking, and also the mindset, and that's it.
And your son did do some canal work, right, later in life?
Yes, he did.
So there's some truth to that. So you shared a birthday. Did Lavinia bake one cake for the two of you, or did you each get your own?
Well, actually, we had one huge cake. A lot of gals.
Now, your firstborn was named DeWitt Clinton Roberts. What can you tell us about Governor Clinton? Because you had a lot of contact with him.
Well, yes, I chose that name because, DeWitt Clinton was a personal role model of mine. And not only was mine, but he was very well known and very well liked in the state of New York, and actually nationwide. So, and he probably would have became president had he not died in the year 1828 at the age of 49 years old.
Wow.
So yeah, that was kind of a surprise.
Yeah. Well, he was criticized by a number of other politicians. In fact, the Erie Canal, in its early stages, was considered to be DeWitt Clinton's ditch. It was a derogatory comment that was made about it, but he was very persistent, and there's no doubt that primarily because of his efforts, the canal was finally completed in New York. I should add something here. This is something that I picked up on just recently at a meeting that was held in Chenango, New York. And it says, while the canal's construction had many transformative effects on the region, it also threatened the existence of indigenous communities. It says, DeWitt Clinton, often considered the father of the Erie Canal, gave a speech to the New York Historical Society in 1811, said Stephen Adams, director of interpretation at the Erie Canal Museum. This is in Syracuse. He made this statement. And DeWitt Clinton proclaimed that, in his words, before the passing away of the present generation, not a single Iroquois will be seen in this state. He was wrong. The Haudenosaunee have stood resilient in the face of centuries of colonization. In fact, a gentleman that spoke in Chenango said that the term Iroquois was a derogatory comment that most people use until really into this century, for that matter. So we talk about the positive side of canal construction. There's certainly many, which we're going to get into. But on the other hand, there were a number of people who had to make some sacrifices, whether it was indigenous people. We'll touch upon the Irish who did a major part of the construction. But that having been said, Governor Clinton certainly was a driving force in the construction of a very important waterway.
For sure.
Yeah. Speaking of the workforce, Irish immigrants, it's been said that they made up about 1/4 of the workforce on the Erie Canal, and many of them came from New York City. They were immigrants that came north to dig the canal. What drew them away from New York City?
Well, they were offered 80 cents a day and roast beef twice a day, and most importantly, whiskey. And I think everybody probably knows that Irish like to drink whiskey. And it was your president, Ronald Reagan, who once said, and I quote, "St. Patrick's Day celebrations began in the year 461, which is when St. Patrick died. And leave it to the Irish to drag out a funeral for over 1,500 years."
Interesting. The Canal Commission, if I'm not mistaken, tried to prohibit alcohol, and it failed. Prohibition didn't take root in the early 1800s. You mentioned 80 cents a day. 80 cents a day. How many hours a day did the Irish work?
Typically it would be no less than 14 hours.
14 hours a day.
Right.
80 cents a day, that's less than 6 cents an hour.
You're good in math too.
Well, I just thought of this. That 1817 $half you gave me, it would take an Irish on the Erie Canal construction crew about 8 hours to earn a 50-cent piece. 8 hours.
Pretty amazing.
Absolutely. I want to move ahead to the year 1818. And the latter part of that year, the canal, which we were extremely instrumental in constructing, had reached the Montezuma Swamp. Can you tell us a little bit about the trials and tribulations of going through a swamp?
Oh yes, that was definitely the most nasty part of the whole canal. There was a lot of deep mud, there was a lot of mosquitoes, and a lot of malaria, people dying from malaria. And in order to combat that, they designed these, what they call Montezuma necklaces. And they were made out of fire, wrapped in green leaves, and then they put them around and wore them as a necklace.
Mm-hmm.
And they may have served the purpose of fighting off the mosquitoes, but they're also choking the men to death. And so, men were dying by the hundreds. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times the men, in order to navigate through the mud and all that, they would remove their clothing and so they could move better and allow less friction.
Right.
Now it just so happened that, during that time, if that wasn't enough, there was a lot of problems getting food sources, unlike what we experienced in the Utica Rome area, where there was plenty of food, especially Italian food over there, which I'm a huge fan of. So anyways, yeah, that was a lot. And one summer, we actually had to stop everything because the men were dying and it was just too much. We couldn't handle it.
So it was Montezuma, mud, mosquitoes, and malaria.
Yep.
And apparently another disease that was causing havoc during the construction of the canal was cholera. And from what I gather, the cholera epidemic at that time was similar in some ways to what we experienced in this country with COVID. Canal business had shut down for a while, and there's great economic loss. It disrupted society in many ways. So, unfortunately, there's some things where history repeats itself, and that's one of them.
I'd also like to let you know that in 1833, there was a man born by the name of Samuel Curtis Johnson, and Sr. And he invented a product called Off. and that would repel mosquitoes. So it's just a shame that he wasn't born like maybe 30 or 40 years earlier, and lives could have been saved. Now today, you use the product off, you don't even think about it saving a life, you just think about it defeating an annoyance.
So that repellent goes back to 1833, and then somewhere along the line they came up with the name, the brand name off. You mentioned Johnson. That
rings a bell, huh?
Yeah, well, seems to.
Yes, that company is still alive today, and it's still a family-owned business, and you would know it as S.C. Johnson.
Okay.
And they make many products for the home.
Okay, interesting. Now, Nathan, you were away from Canastota often, and it was often at months at a time. And your dear wife, Lavinia, cared for 6 children. But she had some other duties besides taking care of business in the home.
Oh yes, she was a pretty busy girl. She was actually a clerk of the works for the building of the home, and she was the primary caretaker for the 6 children and also a grandchild. And not only that, she ran the farm and did everything around her that needed to be done. Good manager and a good wife and a good teammate.
If you look over your shoulder, there's a photograph, and I don't know if there's a date on it. Doesn't indicate in the caption, but that house look familiar?
It sure does. Yeah, I imagine you want to know about the architecture and that kind of thing?
Yeah, before we get to that though, okay. I want to fill in some of the blanks as far as canal construction, because I believe that house was built, it's 1820 to 23, I think,
correct.
Right? Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. But in early 1820, through the efforts of a number of engineers, the canal was extended from Utica to Rochester going west, and then the following year, it was extended going east from Utica to Schenectady. And the highest hurdle in the entire project was a 60-foot rock escarpment. And according to my notes here, you were responsible for engineering the 5 locks and what later became known as Lockport. Can you tell us about what happened in that?
Well, yes, we had to drill through the rocks in order to carve that out. And we were able to obtain specially tempered drills. And they were created by a man named Buttsford. And later on, he continued his work and he settled right in Quality Hill. But those drills, they didn't get in there by themselves. The men had to hammer those drills into the rock, and then what they would do, they would put the brown paper inside, poke it inside those holes, and then they used DuPont blasting powder, filled up the holes, and then what would happen, young boys would light the brown paper fuse and run like crazy.
Sounds pretty dangerous.
It was very dangerous, and many of them didn't make it.
Didn't run fast enough.
Correct.
Okay. So the blasting powder you're talking about, made by DuPont, that was prior to dynamite, because dynamite I think was developed around 1867 by Alfred Nobel, who the Peace Prize is named in his honor.
Yeah.
So this was a DuPont product. Interesting. I am assuming there's some connection between the blasting that went on in Lockport and your partial deafness.
What did you say?
Would you like to borrow my hearing aids?
No, I'm good.
Earlier today, we saw you near that home that was built near Route 5, which was Seneca Turnpike at one time, in Stroud Street. The home looks great. I mean, it's the people that have lived there ever since have taken great care. The original property that you owned, where that house is situated, was much larger. In fact, according to Mrs. Lawson's book, it extended along Stroud Street to James, all the way over to Peterborough Street, and then Turnpike bordered it on the south side. Large piece of property, and today, and you're probably aware of this, there have been many businesses that have been built there. I'm going to mention Zem's, Basilio, Buddha Sausage, and many others. Scores of houses have been built in that plot. In fact, my wife Kathy, her childhood home is part of that property that you once owned. I'd love to see an abstract and see if it can be traced back to Nathan Roberts. What was the cost of that home?
To build it, it was like $2,500. Just for
$2,500.
Yes.
Well, I'll tell you what. You familiar with this?
I've seen those, yeah.
This is cell phone.
A lot of people driving their cars and they're trying to use those too. It's very dangerous.
Yeah. We call it Googling. I'm going to Google $2,500 in 1823, we'll say, when the house was completed, and what that would be in terms of today's currency because of inflation over the years. So just give me a second here. Okay, $2,500 in 1823 would be the equivalent of $67,000 today. $67,000 today. I don't know if you're aware of real estate prices in the year 2025, but I'm not sure you can build much of a house for $67,000.
Not anymore, no.
Yeah, so interesting. Tell us a little bit about the house. What style was the house constructed in?
It was a Georgian style with a touch of Greek revival. The Georgian is the like the wide white clapboards, and you'll notice the eyebrows above the windows.
Right.
And then they have the.
They look like pilasters. It said there weren't columns, right? They were pilasters.
Yes, that's the word.
Yeah.
And they were pretty much attached to the building itself to eliminate that cumbersome look of the big columns.
Right.
So, and a lot of times you would see sunbursts on above the windows and things.
I think it was 15 years ago. Canastota was celebrating its bicentennial of the village, and there was an open house in your home. And I remember seeing the sunburst in the fireplace. It was carved into the fireplace. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of that? Was that sunburst there from the beginning?
Well, yes, that sunburst was carved by a Hessian soldier.
Okay.
And he fell in love with America right after the War of 1812. And that was his work. Yes.
Okay. The Hessians, I believe, they were mercenaries during the Revolutionary War.
Correct.
Yeah. Now, if I'm not mistaken, upstairs there are 5 bedrooms?
Well, yes, I roamed around those bedrooms for many years.
Well, over 2 centuries.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to go back to the Erie Canal construction. 1825, very significant year. We're celebrating the bicentennial of the canal's completion. And by the way, I can't thank you enough for that good luck charm that you've given me. But you left Canastota in September of 1825 to inspect the canal and also to celebrate. And then you weren't finished with canal work. You became the chief engineer of the Pennsylvania Canal. What was your salary?
That was like $3,000 a month.
Okay.
Much better than teaching.
Absolutely, no doubt about it. And then you diversified a bit. In 1830, the book indicated that you worked for the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. So you experienced 3 modes of transportation in Canastota.
Yes.
Turnpikes, canals, and railroads. Do you have any stock in the railroad?
Oh, absolutely. And you might find some certificates stashed in the upstairs.
You're just kidding.
No. Serious.
Now, on a personal note, your wife Lavinia had a sister, Margaret, and she married a merchant from Canastota by the name of John Krause. And the ceremony took place in your home. And John became a millionaire. How do you pull that off, especially in the 1800s?
Yeah, he specialized in banking and in groceries.
Wow.
And during one of my visits, I actually visited a store that him and I believe it was his brother Daniel, they had opened up. And, so, yeah.
And I didn't realize this until recently. He was quite the philanthropist. He spent a tremendous amount of money in helping construct what became known as Krause College on the SU campus, Syracuse University campus. Moving ahead, 1831-32, the winter of 31-32, you went to Alabama. You worked for the Muscle Shoals Canal, then returned to Canastota from Alabama on horseback?
Yes.
What was that like?
Well, as you can imagine, there was a lot of saddle sores, and a lot of aches and pains, and back aches, and it was just complete exhaustion.
That's got to be over 1,000 miles.
It's 1,000 miles.
How long did it
yes.
take to travel 1,000 miles on horseback?
1 month.
A month?
Yes.
Whew. Now, upon your return to Canastota from Alabama, there must have been some changes that you saw in the landscape and the kind of business that was going on, the number of people that were living there. What changes did you notice in the village?
Well, I couldn't help but notice all the robust business and commerce that was taking place. There was boats all in the canal and many businesses that sprung up along the canal. And it was just exciting to see all of the people loading the produce on the boats and, other goods too. I imagine, like grain and, stuff for homes.
From what I gather, before you had left, there were a few cabins, a few teepees, and not much else in Canastota. And the population, you said, it reached
About 300.
300. And today, I believe the population of Canastota is about 4,800. But that's 200 years, almost 200 years later. Late in the 1830s, you were in Rochester, and you were helping construct aqueducts and expanding the canal. And you completed several in 1840. But sadly, there was news from back home with your daughter. What happened there?
She lost a baby during childbirth, and she died too.
Oh, okay. That was Mary Jane. Do I have the right child?
Yes.
Mary Jane. And I hate to bring up more bad news, but in 1840, you lost your job as the chief engineer of the canal. Now, how did that happen? After all you had done, all you had accomplished, the success of that canal, they let you go.
Well, that very often happens when there's a change in political powers, and most usually you'll find that when one door closes, another one opens up. So, yeah.
In April of 1842, in a section of Canastota that you had purchased, and it's roughly between the canal going north several blocks and from Peterborough Street going east, you had basically designed the first street in that section of town. Which street would that be? I'm trying to picture them.
I couldn't think of a better name than Robert Street.
Oh, Robert Street. Okay,
Yes.
we spotted you at the Robert Street Middle School earlier
Of course
today.
you did,
Yeah,
yes.
that's got to be quite a rush to have so many things named in your honor.
Yes.
But you're very well deserving. Nathan, I can call you Nathan. Right?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
You were born in July of 1776, a very significant date in American history. You died in 1851. Excuse me, I'm sorry, not in spirit.
Absolutely
Not
right, yes. And the natural, but I'm very much alive, as you can see right now.
Absolutely. And you were buried in Lenox Rural Cemetery, and that's where we first spotted you this morning. You said during the first 24 years of your marriage, you were away from home 90% of the time.
Yes.
So, say a few words about your wife Lavinia, who, by the way, I think she outlived you by 7 years. I think she died in 1858. But
I wasn't around that. But yes. And I know what you're getting at there. I mean, I was gone most of the time, but yet we still had 6 kids. And I'm sure you meant that in the best possible way.
right. Well, she was a remarkable woman.
Absolutely.
When you consider all the
Yes.
hats she wore, all the roles she played, and whatever. But you were remarkable also. Your engineering expertise helped make New York the Empire State. Because of your efforts, the United States expanded westward, and you did quite a bit for the village of Canastota. There's no doubt about it.
Well, thank you for recognizing that.
Yeah. Now, you know, I was thinking about this the other day. If Canastota had a Mount Rushmore, I don't know if you're familiar with Mount Rushmore, but the 4 people I would put on Mount Rushmore would be Reuben Perkins, who's considered the father of the village of Canastota, Nathan Roberts, Carmen Basilio, he was a world boxing champion, and a gentleman by the name of Edmund Gimbustiani. He was the vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He was a second in command under President George W. Bush. And by the way, Edmund Gimbustiani lived just a short distance up Stroud Street from where your house stands. You're familiar with Mount Rushmore?
Well, now that you mention it, yes, I've heard some things about it, and I really like that idea, proposal for Canastota. And I would recommend that you might look at the Oxbow Road. Up there's a lot of rocks. We could carve images out of there, and that would work great. And if that wouldn't work, you could approach your terrific mayor, Roseanne Warner, and ask her maybe she could set aside some land right in the corner of Robert Street and Peterborough Street and make a bigger than life statue right there. And if that wouldn't work, I understand you have some close ties to the curator of the Boxing Hall of Fame Museum, Mr. Ed Brophy. You could approach him about maybe putting a statue on the property. After all, I understand there was some boxing that took place on the canal.
Oh, absolutely.
So it would be a perfect tie-in, in my eyes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, you know, I'm sure this is going to generate some controversy. That we're throwing out some names here. We could probably add Milton Delano, and there have been many others in the history of Canastota. I just mentioned those because, in my opinion, my humble opinion, those are probably the 4 most famous people in Canastota history. But yeah, I'll mention that to Ed. You know, that's kind of a cool idea.
I could give you some spiritual support.
Absolutely, absolutely. Nathan, you were quite a progressive man. You encouraged women's education. You had a library with over 300 books, when most families only had 1 book, the Bible. And hey, who are you?
I'm Langston.
Langston. What's your last name, Langston?
Mason.
Langston. What a cool name, Langston Mason. Now, you've been watching this interview?
Yes.
Wow. Now, Langston, before you watched the interview, did you believe in ghosts?
No.
You didn't. Now, Langston, after watching the interview with Nathan Roberts, do you believe in ghosts now?
No.
You still don't? Wow. Well, if you don't believe in ghosts, who do you think this guy is?
That's my Jeepa.
Your Jeepa? Jeep, I've heard that before. Jeep, is that like a great-grandfather?
Yes.
He's your great-grandfather?
Yes.
But he's not Nathan Roberts?
Yes.
Okay, not Nathan Roberts. Now, what's his name?
Richard Kelly.
Richard Kelly. That name sounds familiar. Richard Kelly. Wow. You know, Langston, I've been fooled. I feel like a foolish ghost chaser. And if I'm a ghost chaser, what does that make you?
A Ghostbuster.
You are a Ghostbuster. Cool. Well, I'll tell you something. For busting this ghost, I'm going to give you a little token of my appreciation. Oh my God. Oh my God, it is Richard Kelly. That's an Erie Canal coin. A ka-ching. All right, give me a fist bump. All right, very good. You know, even though the ghost is a hoax, what Richard Kelly said today was based on a book by Doris Lawson. And, you know, as they say, history is his story, or in the case of Mrs. Lawson, it's her story. All right? Now, Langston, I would hope that that you remember this day. Okay? You like that coin?
Yeah.
Pretty cool? Yeah. Let me tell you something about that coin. Right now, the mint puts out there, it's $1 coin. You can spend that if you want, or you can save it as a souvenir. It's up to you. But that's $1 coin, and every year they put out a coin for every state. You know how many states there are in the United States? There's a lot of them. There's 50. They're going to put out a different coin for every state, and each coin is going to have a different thing that was made in that state. And for New York, they picked the Erie Canal, which your great-grandfather helped design. He was the engineer. Between now and maybe the tricentennial of the Erie Canal's completion, maybe there'll be some new information about Nathan Roberts. And maybe this story will change a little bit. We'll just have to wait and see. I'd like to read some credits for today's presentation. Of course, Richard Kelly, aka Nathan Roberts, his great-grandson, Langston Mason. Also, I'd like to thank Nancy Pulvereni, who was the costume designer for Richard today. Also, Salon 105 in Oneida, which served as Richard's wig stylist. Of course, Doris Moore Lawson, she was Nathan Roberts' biographer. Her husband, Dr. Eric Lawson, Sr., who was the editor for the book. I'd like to thank Larry Ball, our contact person at Lenox Rural Cemetery. And also my grandson, John Joseph Stagnetti, our fact checker. There is a correction. Nathan Roberts was born March 28th, 1776, not July 28th, 1776. And as always, Ellen and Mark Dunbar are videographers. And I hope you enjoyed the presentation.